What is up, guys? We are back for another episode of the Get Up and Scale podcast alongside Brett and Kai. This week we have on Douglas Quinby. He is Bruce's counterpart. If you guys listened to the earlier episode of Bruce from Arrival, Douglas is his counterpart. And man, Douglas is a wealth of information. We went really deep on this podcast episode. We actually didn't end up talking about the conference a whole lot. We ended up really going deep on the tourism industry, some OTA things, cohorts, and just different segments of customers and where they're coming from, and even Douglas's outlook on the remainder of the year. So this was a really fun episode. I got a lot out of it personally. I am ready to go and implement some of the things that he was talking about and try marketing to some of these cohorts that he was talking about. So yeah, such an incredible episode. If you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to do so. Check us out on YouTube as well and hit that subscribe button there. Thanks for tuning in.
I gotta work, grind. That's just the way it is. I gotta get up, scale, and grow my biz. I gotta scale, grow, get up, go, scale, grow, get up, go.
Yeah, let's get started. So, yeah, we got Douglas here today, the godfather of the tour industry, some might say. Really appreciate you having...
Who said that, Kai? I think that's the first time I've heard that. You just said that for the first time.
I might have just coined it, but yeah, the godfather of...
The godfather
the
of
tour
travel.
and activity industry.
Actually,
yeah, godfather of travel.
That's not... So there is actually somebody... the guy's name is Rod Cuthbert. He founded Viator in, I want to say, is it 94? Actually founded Viator before Expedia, and a marketplace for tours and activities in Australia. And he's actually kind of, he's been referred to as the godfather of the industry because he was the first person to kind of put together like a marketplace for experiences. And yeah, he's quite a character. He's spoken at Arrival a couple of times. And in fact, I remember, and he's, a huge champion of the industry. He's actually someone you should have on your podcast, by the way. That's the real godfather of,
all right.
Of tours and activities.
We'll use that as his intro.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we were, in fact, funny enough, we were recording with Brennan of Propelic earlier today. He said the first question we should ask you is, when is that research going to be done?
Tomorrow.
Got it.
Yes,
okay,
tomorrow.
That's all I was wondering. Yeah.
Good response. Yeah, so obviously we've got Douglas here today. If you've ever been to an Arrival event, he's everywhere and anywhere, in all rooms at all times. I think I see you. I leave a room and I'm like, how did he beat me to this other room already? So I've been thankful enough to have gone to as many as I've gone to because I've made some really good connections with a lot of people and I've learned a lot of things along the way. But yeah, some background on yourself, Douglas. How did you get into all of this? Where did this begin? How did you get into Arrival, and where's the origin?
So I've been in travel and tourism for longer than you, Justin. I'll leave it at that. And but I spent several years at a company called Focusrite, which is an online travel research and events company, in some ways actually quite similar to Arrival. This was a company it was called Focusrite. It was a company that started in the mid-90s by a man named Philip Wolf, and who was, in many ways a visionary. He really saw the changes that were happening with the advent of the internet. This is probably, I don't know, when did you guys go to college? Because I was listening to your founding story on the first episode where you were talking about your experience at college.
You have a listener. Yeah, I went to college in 2006 for undergrad, 2005 through 2009, I want to say, yeah.
Yeah, okay, right. Yeah, you guys are just babies,
I'm
right?
older.
So,
Than
So
just
so like in the very early days of the internet, like in the early 1990s when it started to become mainstream-ish, you would on your business cards you'd have multiple email addresses because the systems didn't connect, and you might have you would have Kai at Yahoo, and then Kai at Lycos, and Kai at Terra. I'm trying to remember all of Terra Lycos. I don't know. Anyway, so these early kind of the website kind of portals from the early days. But anyway, Philip had this. He could just see travel fundamentally is you're not really selling a product, right? A physical product so much as an idea, right? Like a dream or, a possibility. And so it's heavily information based. And our experience at the time of booking travel was, I think I want to go somewhere. So I'd have to pick up a phone and or go over to a handful of travel agencies, wait on the phone forever just to see if I can get a better deal right on a particular flight. And it was just amazingly inefficient and absurd by today's standards. And so he just had this vision that the internet was going to transform how travel was discovered and bought and sold, and travel agencies were going to be transformed, which obviously they have been, and tour operations. And I mean, there at some of the early conferences, you had, I remember there was an SVP from Air France who got up in the middle of all of this and said, this is totally ridiculous. Nobody's ever going to buy an airplane ticket online. That's absurd. And so here we are 25 years or 30 years later. But it's a kind of very similar thing with Arrival. Like I was at Focusrite, and where we just focus on research and events for the online travel world. There was a sector of travel that had been largely overlooked in the world of kind of research, which was tours, activities, and attractions. And and I think around the time when the iPhone had really demonstrated its impacts, this was 2009 or 2010, 3 years after the launch of the iPhone, I initiated coverage of this sector, and we did some market sizing work and analysis to try to get a sense of, okay, how many operators are there? How are consumers buying it? Because it was just so obvious, right? Like with the phone now, that you could discover and have access to information to book these things in a way that you never could before. And then, began studying that sector, and a few years later, 2016, 2017, it just became really obvious that, there was this huge market, all of these companies, and they were going through, so the changes that I was talking about with airlines 30 years ago, that was starting to happen in your world today, right? In experiences where suddenly you had companies massively adopting booking systems, switching on, online booking engines, connecting to different platforms, really figuring out the whole digitization of everything and how the industry was going to be transformed. And I just saw, there was no conference, no news resource. There was nothing. There was nowhere for this industry to get together and try to figure all this stuff out. So that's it.
It's really interesting for me, for someone who's built his business like from start to beginning in this new era, right? Like on day one, I launched my first business in 2011. Even by then, right away we had a website, a booking system, all our accounting was online, right? Like the phone number was still like kind of important, but not that important. It's hard for me to imagine what it must have been like starting a tour or travel business like in the 90s. Did they literally have to just write down the bookings? Like in an Excel file? Like, how did it work back then? I'm honestly just curious. I think a lot of people would be. I don't know how it worked.
So you don't have to time travel to experience that. I'm from upstate New York, and for when was this? 3 or 4? A few years ago, we had a family because my siblings were all kind of spread out around the world, but we had a family get together in our hometown. And there's Lake George up there, so we rented a home around Lake George, and that's like a common summer vacation spot. And we all have kids, so we thought, okay, let's find some things to do for the kids. And we found a zip line, an adventure park up there. I'm not going to name names, but I remember planning this out. I found it. I found a website, but there was no booking engine or anything. So, but there was a phone number, so I called them. And I said, hey, we're going to be up there around these dates. We'd like to, make a reservation. When can we come? Gave me some options. And we settled on a date. And the girl on the phone said, okay, what's your name? It's Douglas. And she said, great, you're all set. And I was like, wait, do you want me to pay? Like, do you want a credit card? No. And then I said, well, do you want my email address so that you can, send me some information or remind me or, And she's like, no, you're fine. It's like, okay. So fast forward to the vacation, we get there and we, we're checking in and it just, because I kind of do this, all the time, but I was especially curious with this one. I was like, hey, just curious, no one took my payment over the phone and there was no way for me to book online. I was just curious, like, how do you guys manage all this? Because it was a huge operation. Like there were buses out there from all the summer camps in the area. Like this is a real, like, big business, right? And I was like, yeah, like, do you use a booking system or something to manage all of this? And this college, girl clearly was there for the summer. She's like, no, the owner, he doesn't like computers. And so I said, well, how do you manage, how do you take bookings or deal with cancellations? And then she went under the desk and she pulled out this giant cardboard calendar, with all the days of the month on it. And then she put it down and she said, oh, here's my eraser. And I just removed this slot, So yeah, that's how it was done and how it is still done today, in fact, among far too many businesses.
What percentage would you say, people always talk about this, what percentage of tour and activity and travel businesses are kind of offline with their booking system?
So I guess it depends a bit on how you define that. So I think if I recall, the most commonly used booking system, I think it's the Wix. It's the Wix booking widget. If you use the Wix CMS, which is very narrow in scope. That's it, right? Yeah. So if you would call that online, I guess then the numbers. I guess it's now. There's certainly a majority of operators that are online, but so. It varies a lot. I think in the U.S. it's a majority, but even so, I've been to experiences here where there's a lot offline. We work with a lot of national tourism organizations in Europe and elsewhere, where a couple have estimated that maybe 20% of their operators are using fully online bookable systems.
Wow!
So,
wow!
Imagine that. Really, imagine if 20% of hotels were online bookable, or if 20% of airlines, right, were online. There would be no travel industry as we know it today, right? But for experiences, it's not uncommon.
I couldn't imagine trying to run a travel franchise, tourism franchise, without being able to see everyone's booking systems. I
like that, Justin.
This is what I picture that she popped up from behind the desk with right here, the big ass calendar of 2024.
Yeah, that's it. Nice. Pretty much. Yeah. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. And it's funny that you said you felt like the tourism industry was so far behind then. I'm curious how far behind you feel like it's still maybe in current time.
Well, that's an interesting question. Behind what, right?
Behind in terms of technology, sometimes even the experience itself, like, but I think when I asked the question more so like from the tech front of, some of the bells and whistles that maybe the travel and tourism industry doesn't have.
Yeah, maybe one way to think about this though, like certainly you can just look at like a very simple statistic like, okay, online bookability for, say, day tour operators around the world versus, versus airlines or hotels, and yeah, it's staggeringly behind. But I don't think it's really a fair comparison because, or a useful one because, so here's a really interesting statistic. So every couple of years we do what we call a big global operator landscape study where we work with a lot of partners and we field a survey to as many operators as we can get the survey in front. And we just try to get a sense of, what's going on, how's business going, what are you doing, where are you going, what are you building, what tech do you use, all that stuff, what are your marketing channels, sales channels, all the trends. And by the way, for you guys and everyone who listens, please, take the time, take 10 minutes to respond to the survey. It's just super helpful for us, and we promise it'll be helpful for the industry. But one of the questions that we asked in the first study we did in 2019 was simply, what are your, basically trying to get a profile of the business around your plans for growth. Like, what are your expectations for growth? What are are you basically a growth-oriented operator or not so much? And 87% of respondents, this was a global survey of more than 7,000 companies. 87% of respondents said they're not focused on growth. I mean, they don't want to fall behind.
Yeah.
But they don't want to, they don't want to lose, but they're not in this industry necessarily to, build a franchising empire, right?
To get up
like
and scale.
Justin, right? Or, or you, Kai, like they're like, I just love the food in my city. I know these amazing restaurants. I can design an amazing experience. It could be a great part-time job.
These are lifestyle entrepreneurs, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so in that sense, they're always going to be behind, right? Because you can't be a lifestyle entrepreneur and start an airline.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Part of it. You could do it maybe with a bed and breakfast, but
yeah. I've thought too, like the intense fragmentation in the market lends itself to being behind too, because there's not a lot of consolidation. So, most of the tour businesses don't have these economies of scale that allow them to invest in like the latest tools, like an algorithm which can do amazing dynamic pricing real time, like Airbnb, right? Because these economies are much smaller and tend to be local, and there's not a large, as a percentage of the overall market, right? Some like large amount of consolidation. I've always thought that probably had something to do with it as well.
Oh yeah. That's like, it's amazing to me that so like Viator, for example, the biggest online travel agency in our space, gross bookings around 4 billion or so, and growing. They represent, I think, like less than 3% of the market. So
Wow.
Like,
it's wild.
Yeah. So it's
less than 3% of our business for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So
I
it's
think they're
just
about 2% of our gross
different.
bookings.
Good for you. By the way,
I would love more Viator bookings.
Or I was going to say, or could you
really?
use more?
Yeah. Our industry, I don't think lends itself to the average Viator customer very well, because we're mostly private events, large groups, and most of Viator's traffic are small individual ticket sales. And so, we get some in some tourism markets, but the vast majority of our business are these private bookings for large social gatherings. And those sort of people aren't booking through OTAs. It's probably good for us, but also like I would love to turn on these channels, be able to go into a new market and just like, all right, let's turn on that flow, but Viator's never done that for us for whatever reason.
Yeah, you just have to give them 50%, you'd be okay. They'll give you some bookings.
Yeah. Oh, with
How
their
many OTAs do you work
boost.
with, Kai?
Yeah.
How many what?
How many OTAs do you work with, or resellers do you work with?
Brett's a great person to ask that question too. He's our
It's mostly just Viator, Expedia, Get Your Guide. But Get Your Guide has been on the, like we've been just signing up in most of our locations with that.
Okay.
Oh, and Batch App. Batch App, now that's the one exception. Batch App in certain markets are like 20% of our sales because that
wow.
niche is
Okay.
so directly, on the nose for what we're doing,
Yeah, so that though to me is also something that's really interesting about this industry. To your point of diversification is so. First of all, like this isn't really an industry, right? We do our best to make it an industry when we convene them at our conferences, but what does and in fact, so like party bikes, would that be a good characterization, like for one, and party boat, is that the right characterization for your
Sure.
businesses, Kai?
Those are nice generic terms. Yeah.
Okay. So what does a party bike, party boat experience have to do with a kayaking tour versus a adventure zip line versus a private dining experience in someone's house versus going to the top of the Empire State Building? Like those are just five basically entirely different businesses with entirely different customer segments, destinations, customer journeys, the whole decision process, the flow. And we're not even talking about like the operational end on the back end for you guys. And that just creates just all sorts of really, enormous challenges, like at an industry level, like as you were saying about, consolidation and kind of growth and scale. But at the same time, it also creates some amazing opportunities because you have the possibility for all of these niche businesses and platforms to emerge and create something new, like the Batch App, for example, which is super interesting. What's also interesting is speaking to Mike, the founder, I think, or one of the founders.
He was just on our podcast. We actually just released that episode last week.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, great. Yeah. So yeah, super interesting business. But I think he mentioned to me, and so I'm just remembering this offhand from a chat we had a year ago, but something like 70 to 80% of his supply is also on Viator, right, or on other OTAs. And yet he's and his team have come up with a way of merchandising, like putting a casing around it, right, to make it appeal to a particular customer segment who, when they're taking the trip to, say, to Nashville, as a independent, like an independent leisure traveler, they'd book it on Viator or book it directly with the OTA or the operator. But when they're going in a group, they might find it through, through the Batch App, right? Through a Bachelor party or something.
Yeah, Mike said an amazing statistic to me, which blew my mind. And correct me if I'm wrong, guys. Didn't you say like 40%, according to his data, of all bachelorette parties in the United States used the Batch App last year?
40%
during our show. Like it was just shy of half, which to me was just wild that they got that much penetration.
I don't remember
that
what
quickly.
the exact stat was. Yeah,
it was close.
a lot.
It was around that number, but that blew my mind how quickly, because they've been around for what, like 4 years.
Yeah.
So that's a really interesting niche. Is these, like, I guess you call it like a boutique OTA, where you're like very like deep in like a niche,
Yeah, it's partly that, but
Niche.
if you guys have ever had the chance to use the actual app, Douglas, definitely
It's
recommend
phenomenal.
downloading and clicking around. It's amazing. Like the customer experience is so much better. Like there's like a group chat with your friends within the app. So like you're like dragging and dropping your itinerary in. It's really cool, and I'm excited to see where it goes. But they're doing more than
Bachelorette.
Viator.
They look like a space station with everybody like transporting around. And if you compared Viator software, it looks like, I don't know. It looks like it has vacuum tubes in it and there's dust everywhere. Like the product itself is really, really nice too, which is probably a credit to why they grew so quickly.
Yeah.
Viator, if you're listening, all offense intended, because the software sucks.
Well,
Yeah.
You think with the budget they had, Douglas, they have an amazing budget, right? Don't they have a lot of capital? Can they design an app? Like, I bet you anything, Brett right here could probably design a better app than Viator.
Definitely the
100%.
admin dashboard
On the back end,
And
yeah.
Douglas, just for context, like we have a lot of trouble managing like the enterprise features, like multiple locations. We're like logging in and out. It's like sending
logging in and out.
It's like sending it's
Logging in.
sending 2FA codes to like old managers, and like it's not that intuitive for a big franchise like us. But yeah.
Yeah, well, I don't think you're alone. I mean, certainly there's no shortage of complaints, on the operator side for Viator. So, but I'm not a spokesperson for Viator, but they will be at they're always at our conferences. I will say I'll say in their, not in their defense, but on their behalf, that I've noticed a real shift in their, and in general with a lot of the OTAs, I think I'm going to take a little credit, on behalf of Arrival for this, that by assembling the starting this business and creating the conferences and bringing all these operators together, that it's put a face on the industry, like it's put
Totally.
that they've really had to contend with, and they've had to realize. So the way these platforms work, especially once you get to the scale of like a Viator, is when they all started, it was Rod and his team, and I actually remember it was Rod and his co-founder was Cameron. Can't remember his last name. And they literally would just run around from city to city, knock on doors to get any operator they could, right, to sign up, and half the time just getting the doors slammed in their faces, right? And but they built that business in the early days, just like just like you guys have been building yours and others. But I think as the business has grown, and now I think they've got like 60,000 operators on the platform, 350,000 experiences or something, then you've got to have systems and process. And so what happens is, if you're maybe a really top tier supplier, then you've got an account manager, but that's like the top of the top. And then everyone else, you've got an extranet and a chat bot and an email address, right? And so that's a challenge, but they're well aware of it. And I think one of the things they're trying to do by coming to the conference and other things is to let the industry know that they're actually people, human beings, running the business. And there's some good ones who are really trying to do some good things.
Yeah. I'm curious.
I don't dislike Viator. Yeah. Go ahead.
No, I don't either. We do like 20% of business through Viator, and they've been very useful for newer locations specifically, because you can crank up what you give them and they'll show more ads with your business on it, and you're not paying for that customer until the booking happens, which is great. I think that part of it is really unique. Whereas if we're all using Google ads, you could spend unlimited amount of money and never get a booking,
Yeah.
So I think that side of it's really interesting.
Yeah.
What do you guys think of Accelerate, but in general, the idea of paying higher commission for, for more visibility and theoretically more bookings?
I was going to ask you, Justin, we've never considered raising Accelerate to 50%. Have you done that?
Not to 50%. No, we've raised it to 30%, right? And it'll show you like the impressions of the ad spend that it's going to go out to. I find it interesting because we also run our own ads. So in my head, I'm like, are we now just competing against each other for ad space? And I don't really understand that partnership yet between the two. But when it comes to commission, like I'm open to it as long as what we're getting is similar value to what we could get direct, whether that's from a customer standpoint or a customer service standpoint or customer communications. Like, I think that's the one downfall that I dislike about third parties, is that you lose a lot of that really good customer communication that I've spent a lot of time to build out within my own admins and managers and texting and booking platform. And like, you lose a lot of that when you book third party. And you just have to think of like pricing strategies. Like, what does it cost you to run this tour? And is it worth giving up 30%? And they don't pay out on taxes, so plus another 7%. Is it worth giving up 37% of a booking just to potentially get a review and some word of mouth? I think that's where a lot of the value comes from, is if you can turn these customers into lifetime customers. And for us, where we have franchises, we can benefit from it immensely, especially if they're all kind of like mine are all, a lot of them are in Florida. Kai's are a little more spread out. If I can get them to go from our Orlando location to our Tampa location next week and they can book directly, it was worth the 30%, you know, easily.
Yeah.
It's worth the 30% whether they do that or not. But yeah, I think some of it is just lost in the communication, the customer service aspect of it, that I wish there was a better way to do that, you know? And I think that's partially why we're seeing some of this Airbnb backlash, is because, man, their customer service side of experiences is horrendous. It's bad.
Yeah, I don't think I'm a good person to ask, because Airbnb or Viator is such a small part of our business, Douglas. I don't have a strong opinion of it, other than seems like it would be strategically useful, especially for like new operators.
Yeah, but
when you're breaking into a new market.
What even if it's not Viator though? If it's one of these different platforms and they're and you could go from 20% to 30% to get more visibility. Well, is it worth?
Batch App's talking about that too, about offering a higher tier commission. So yeah, I was thinking about myself for the markets where we use Batch App a lot, you know, would we do that? And again, I think it's how much excess inventory do we have? What's our contribution margin? You know, how much are we spending? Do we have strategic goals for market share? You know, like you said, Justin, you're not really doing it at that point for your profit margin. You're really thinking about what your other objectives are in that particular market. If you got a competitor who you really want to take out, then I could see ramping it up and not worrying about whether you make money on it or not. Or if you're new, again, when you're new, volume tends to be more important than margin.
Reviews are the most important thing when you're new.
Yeah, reviews and volume, right? You want to have as many tours out there so you get the content and you get the reviews and the social proof. So I think it's great because it's another tool in the toolbox to use.
Yeah, it's also a problem for the OTAs as well. That cold start problem when you've got a new product. So how do you get visibility on the OTA with the product with no reviews? Because their algorithm looks at reviews as well, and that's a problem that they're dealing with, especially when they know, like, they've got a great operator they know is, you know, tried and true on their platform, but they're launching a new product or a new destination. How do they surface it? I know they explore a lot of issues around that, but they're exploring it, but it's one that they deal with as well. How do you guys approach that?
Go ahead, Kai.
So the chicken and egg problem, right? You launch your new business. And so how do you build social proof when you need social proof to get sales, but you need sales to get social proof, right?
Well, or even you launch a new a new tour, you know, or a new like you know, Justin, maybe you're launching a particular, you know, a new type of experience, right? It could be out of the same location, you know, same destination, but it's a slightly different
glow-in-the-dark tour instead of our normal daytime tour.
You know, the skinny dipping kayak experience, the alligator skinny dipping kayak experience, brand new idea. By the way, I've come up with it here on the podcast. You can take
there we go,
run with it, right? So, perfect. But how do you solve that problem?
Yeah, it's tough because not only that, now you're looking at you want to be seen on multiple platforms, and you know, you want your Google ranking to go up, not just your Viator ranking. So you need to get reviews on Google and Viator, and you want to get your whatever you know, your own direct rankings to go up too. And so yeah, you've got to consider all of those things, and that's why I think at first it's important to get the customers, get the reviews, get the word of mouth, and over time, you should have more full tours, which should relate or correlate to higher profit margins and more revenues and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
But I think up front, you do need to be willing to give up a little bit more than you can earn, you know?
Oh, that's the answer, is you have to have the budget to do that, right? Like if you don't want to grow slow and organically and take multiple years to build your business, which is the traditional path, you want to skip the line, so to speak, you have to pay. Simple as that. And you shouldn't expect to have even a profit the first year. If you want to grow real fast, you're going to have a huge ad budget. You're going to prioritize volume over margin. And that volume is what's going to get you the social proof you need to establish yourself in your market, you know? And so that means for the first year, doing everything you can to fill as many seats as you can. And if that means putting Viator at 30% and spending 20-30% of revenue on ad spend, that's what you got to do. And that's the biggest mistake tour operators make when launching, is under-investing in their business, you know, because they want to be profitable on day one. And usually they don't have enough cash to really push their business out there, you know? And so in my opinion, that's the way you do it, is you have to spend a lot.
Yeah. And those costs can also, you know, you can also put in a lot of effort. Like something that we do is when we launch a new location, like Wilmington, for example, we get some influencers in the area, we give them a tour at a significant discount, and then we get them to fill up a few boats. Like we're constantly doing very unprofitable tours, making sure those QR codes with the review links are on those boats. And I think what a lot of operators listening would like to know, at least from our perspective, is that the difference between 5 reviews and like 30 reviews is very drastic. I mean, if you have like 5 to 10 good reviews on Google and on Viator, that is, I mean, I feel like some operators don't even have that. And if you work really hard to get those first 30 to 50 reviews, that's going to give Viator and Google the ammo they need to justify putting you in front of customers.
Yeah.
The other interesting aspect to the Accelerate program, though, is, you know, it's set up as a marketplace. And so you are, you know, you're competing with other operators in your, so in your competitive set. I think the 50% number that has to do specifically with, you have the option for your product display pages of removing those competitor ads from your display page if you go to that number. But there was an operator speaking to at our European event this spring who I love the line that they use. Basically, they said, you know, Viator is giving us the noose to hang ourselves with, because you get a lot of operators in one market all on this, and there's like this kind of pressure, right? Like you've got to bid up to make sure that that you're there. And in some of these markets, for some of these operators, you know, we're like summer markets in Europe where, you know, Viator is, you know, it's a big deal.
Yeah.
For a lot of these businesses. So you got to be very, very careful about, thoughtful about how you approach these decisions and do a lot of testing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's the thing, is you just need to think about it and have a strategy when it comes to that, you know. Don't just go into it thinking, oh, let's just move this little knob around and, you know, and like see what happens. Like have a little bit of a strategy there and some guardrails in case it does go a little crazy, you know. One question I have is, and it's funny because I don't want to keep talking about Viator, but it is about Viator.
Please.
because I see that Viator has a conference this year. So what does that mean to you guys? Like, what does that look like from your perspective? Like, are they trying to distance themselves from Arrival? Are they trying to show up more for their customers? Like, why do you think they're having their own conference, and how do you think it's going to go?
This is it's a co-located event at Arrival, and we've actually done this for a few years. So Fair Harbor, the booking system, held their Spark conference at Arrival for the last couple of years as well. And we also do at the conference a lot of other co-located smaller events for different partners. So that's really all that it is, right? But I think it's I don't know how it's going to go from their perspective. Like, they're running the content and doing it on their own. But I think it's a signal that they want to mean more to their operators. I think they recognize, their supply relationships are really important, and not just the top suppliers, the really big high volume ones, but they want to provide a forum where they can interact with a broader range of operators and have that friendly interface.
I'm really curious to see what the content is that they're going to deliver during their portion of that, and really curious to talk to others to hear what they get from it. I
can tell you though, Justin, just that the intent is a user conference.
Okay.
So they're not going to do a general content session about, AI or this. It's specifically how to improve your business, with Viator. So it's a platform user conference.
Okay. Yeah, I like that idea actually, because that's kind of where my head was going is, I've been to Spark pretty much every year that they've had it, and I'm always just in my head curious, like, why they're running sessions on things that they're not experts in, and I'm one of Fair Harbor's top clients, like, I have no problem saying that to them, is like, what are you guys running, some of these like sessions for when the people don't even do those roles in their day-to-day inside the organization. So I think it's very smart of Viator to position it more in the sense that you just said. That makes me feel like it's going to be more of a success than I originally was thinking. I was thinking, oh, they're just going to try to have a couple marketing people come in, try to have a couple AI people come, just like, and I really like the sense that as an operator and as a user of Viator, you can figure out ways to hopefully leverage that a little bit more. And I like that. I like that a lot more than the alternative. So what can people expect in San Diego for Arrival? Do you guys have any secured like keynotes that we can get in on early that we can hear about? Like,
yeah, we want to get up and scale exclusive here, Douglas. We're all about getting these exclusives, and we've had a few of them. So give us what's some juicy stuff coming for Arrival?
Juicy stuff coming for Arrival. Boy. Well, look, I'm afraid I'm gonna disappoint. There's a lot of really interesting things happening in the industry. We're gonna put a big focus on that. So when we're ready to, when we're ready to announce, we will. I mean, look, it's just like with any, business. I mean, and I personally just believe that, you set super low expectations and then massively over deliver, right? And that's the way to just really wow the customers and keep them coming back and connected to your brand. So, when we're ready, we'll definitely talk about it. But yeah, there's some pretty interesting things that are happening in the industry, and also some companies, companies. So here's maybe one way to think about this, without specifically talking about Arrival per se, but there's. If you step back for a second, there's this whole universe or say, discipline within industry and around the idea of experience and experience design as a horizontal function. And there are some organizations that focus on, experience design, thinking. So in other words, how do you design a guest experience or a customer experience? And what does that look like? Perhaps the most well-known thinker in that area is Joe Pine, and he was one of the co-authors of the book Experience Economy. This is going back to the the 90s, but
Yep.
This idea of how do you create that, and I've always found it interesting within our we are the experiences industry, but I find it amazing how few companies really take an experience design approach to their own tour design. It comes back, or their experience design. It comes back. Well, what we talked about at the beginning a little bit, just the example of the 87%, right? That aren't growth minded, right? They're like, I love being on the water. I want to spend as much time on the water as I can. I'm gonna buy a bunch of paddle boards or kayaks and take people around, and that's that's it, right? And there's a lot of folks out there who do that, and I've actually we've got a lot of folks who come to Arrival because they love the community, they love what they do, but they have no interest in acquiring, expanding, but they don't want to fall behind, and they love hanging with their homies at the conference and just learning and keeping up. But the whole idea of how do you create an experience that from beginning to end that optimizes the guest experience, that optimizes for customer loyalty and engagement. So just like one little concept that I find, as I've read about this, one very small concept is the idea of the prosaic experience. So like all of us in the experience industry, and you guys are like, you want to create amazing experiences, and you want people to come away like just blown away, and you want them to come back. But a really important part of that is that aspects of the tour, the experience, must be absolutely prosaic, like forgettable. And those in some ways are the hardest, because if they're not, then they become a problem, right? So like
Signing
if I
the
have
waiver or something.
signing the waiver, right? Or booking, right? Or payment, right? Or figuring out, if I've got some gear I got to put on, what's the right size, and getting set up, and how can you make things totally forgettable so that you just remember those peak moments that fill your memories, right? And your photos on your phone. So so
Douglas,
concepts like that are super important.
That topic's so important. I feel like I encounter this all the time, where people spend so many hours setting up their business, buying insurance, like I'm using a boat tour business, getting a slip, procuring the boat, right? Shipping the boat there. Then they hire the captains, they build a website, they do their AdWords, they do the marketing, and then they're like, I'm done, right? I have a slip, I have customers coming in, we have a boat that takes them from point A to point B, right? I have people, I have a payroll system I've set up. Oh, that was hard. And it was like, I tell these people, like, that's the beginning of building a business. That's not the end, right? It's not about buying a boat and getting insurance. That's what you need to play the game. The game is the experience for the customer, right? And so I always try to flip the script. I'm like, this is all the stuff you have to do till you can get to the luxury of then saying, what is the experience for my customer going to look like? Because at the end of the day, that is what people are paying for, right? I love that point about prosaic experiences too, because, we always try to tell people the customer experience like starts from the first time they visit your website and they call you, right? And after you're done, what does your follow-up email look like? How do you engage to build that customer loyalty? once they've finished your experience. Like it's this wide range, right, of customer experience, this whole funnel of activities. I've never really sat down and thought, it was like, what parts of that do I want them not to think about and to be forgettable? That's actually a really good insight. But I'm glad people are talking about that, because it's something I'm passionate about.
Yeah, there's a book by a couple of professors at University of Utah, but it's experience design, and it just kind of walks you through like the step by step. And they have some really great examples. I don't have the names of the authors offhand, but it's a great like step by step, of what it.
I would love to read that book. Yeah, it sounds really interesting to me.
And the thing about it too is it applies to it can apply to like a visit to your doctor's office, right? Or where any type of business where you're receiving guests.
Yeah, I want the prostate check to be more prosaic, Douglas.
Prosaic prostate. That's a great business name.
Oh, I love it. That should be the whole practice. We have prosaic fingers. You'll forget about them. They're so
You'll
small.
forget about them. Oh
so
my
small.
God.
All right, time to get insurance and get accounting set up. Let's go.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, no, but hey, look, I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about, Arrival, but we'll share things with you when it comes. But that's a really big, it's a really big piece. And there's so many things that companies are doing within our space to rethink the guest experience, that both on the digital side, as you said, right, it starts when you first interact with the website of the brand, as well as on-site as well. There's some amazing things that are happening with companies designing experiences around like passions or interests. This is also to the diversity and fragmentation of our industry. So we talked about some of these niche OTAs, but like another great example is Captain Experiences, and it's just one, right? It's where they're fishing on a niche and designing a guest experience, specifically around that, so fishing and hunting, right, and outdoor, right, and what does it require, right, to be able to really deliver an amazing, guest experience. And you think about all the different industries, or I say sub-industries within experiences, and all of the different needs that each of them have, right? Like how do you, building anticipation for, a kayak experience is going to be very different from building one for, an escape room, right? Or, a bachelorette, party, or, whatever it may be.
True. Yeah, it's cool. It's fun seeing all these different companies pop up and meeting them at Arrival, and just hearing about these things, that there's companies out there trying to help you design your tour, like it's something that I think about quite often, probably Kai does too. Just in my daily, I'm like, ooh, could we make that little thing a little bit less frictional for the customer? Or could we just change this a little bit? Or could we adjust this, or make the tour shorter or longer? Or you see something in a review and you're like, oh, maybe we should try that, or could we launch from down the road? Is it safer and easier? Yeah, it's funny how much you actually think on the daily about the customer experience, and you don't realize that it all ties into tour design. And I don't know, I feel like that's all I think about is like 80% of my day is just like tour design. And I very rarely go on my own tours, but I'm always thinking of, what can we do differently and better? And I think those companies that think about that often are probably the ones that will continue to succeed. Last question for you that I got. Our last episode, we talked about our thoughts on what the rest of 2024 is going to look like leading into 2025. It's funny because I think we both kind of thought wrong on the first half of the year so far. I kind of thought we were going to do worse than we did, and Kai thought they were going to do better than they did, right? And so where do you think we are right now, and how does the rest of this year pan out?
Oh, that's all? That's all you want to know?
It's easy.
Okay.
That's
Easy, Doug. You're the guy
Anyone
that should
knows.
know.
It's you.
You have the answer.
Well, the short answer is I think it depends. So it depends where you are, who your customers are, what your product is. Um, so I guess some really broad themes. Uh, so domestic travel is okay, but and this, I would say it's going to be okay for the summer. And yes, you can write that down. You can quote me on that, Kai. But uh, uh, I mean, look, you guys are reading the news. I trust, just like I am. So consumer sentiment is very uneven. So price sensitivity has returned in a big way in 2024, especially for those kind of secondary or tertiary trips, right? So if we think about like the typical traveler, they might have that one big trip. There's still very strong demand for Europe and long haul travel. I don't think everyone has quite got that kind of COVID bug out of them in terms of that kind of demand. So I think if you're an operator, in Europe, you're right now scrambling to figure out how you're going to get through the summer season, not only because of the enormous demand from the U.S., but also Asia is coming back in droves. And so they're really going to be returning to Europe for the first time this year.
Yeah.
Not so much for the U.S. There are a variety of issues there. Politics. There's an effort by the Chinese government to try to keep folks traveling at home and to try to keep money in the country as much as possible. So there's a lot of variation. We also see a lot of, like, if you're an outdoor and adventure kind of experiences, what's been really interesting, demand for that really shot up during the pandemic, but it's continued. Whereas we've seen other categories kind of, kind of fall in line. So like some during the pandemic went,
Yeah.
right. But now they're kind of back, on that trend line. A few went really like this, because of what happened during the pandemic as well. And now they're kind of coming back. But, outdoor adventure, kind of active experience as a category in general has, kind of really shot up, but it hasn't, it's kind of stayed pretty high. I mean, it's come down a bit off of the super peak, but it's been, really strong. And I think there's a few things behind that. I think one is the experience through COVID really just opened this up as a possibility. I think the market has really grown, and there's a lot more experiences and opportunities that are out there. Another facet to this too, I think, has to do with customer segmentation. We're doing some work, right now, and we'll be releasing a report in a few weeks on this. But so understanding kind of wealth distribution, especially in the U.S., I think will be more and more important for all industries. Like you're seeing it, like what's happening in, say, with retail, and like with some really fascinating things happening in the world of kind of restaurants and fast food and kind of upscale fast food and so forth, in terms of reflecting kind of the different segments of our consuming market, where you've got a certain segment. So just as an example with experiences, about a fifth of all experiences travelers, so people who take a trip and they do a bookable experience, about a fifth of them are affluent, so household income of at least $150,000 a year. But they account for basically half of every dollar spent on experiences. So they're doing more trips, but in particular, they're doing a lot more experiences, and their appetite for spend is significantly greater. And also what's interesting too is they're younger. Like so there's this cohort of, young high earning professionals, both just before and just recently married. So I'd say married without kids, and that are just, they travel like crazy, doing 5-6 trips a year. They're shorter. They do things like, so they stay in a lot of hostels, right? Which is surprising, right? You think, oh, they've got all this money, they're going to live it up. But no, they want adventure, right? They're looking for an experience. They want to be challenged. It's not just going and lying on a beach and having the umbrella drinks, right? But they want to be pushed and challenged. And so we're seeing that there's a really interesting segment that we're going to spend a lot of time on and try to unlock for our market. So it's really important, I think, for operators in our industry to really know, okay, who are you selling to? And also, how does your product fit into their worldview? Are you like the focus of the trip, or are you the add-on right at the last minute? Are you the one where they're going to put the discounting, like, I'm only going to do it if I can get a deal, whereas this is my bachelor party or my bachelorette party. I want to do this amazing boat party thing. I'm going to go all out. Like, and in that case, right? Like, for Kai or your franchisee, they've got, or your licensee, you got to make sure that they are, they're making the most of that sale. They're yielding up on everything. They're offering every bell and whistle because that group will go for it, right? Where, if it's, oh, I've got an extra few hours on the trip, can I do a quick visit to a museum? Oh, and I can get a cheap ticket. Great. Like, I'm going to go in. So it's about understanding your customer, but also where your product kind of fits into their view of the trip.
Yeah, your different customer segments are going to have different, like, price elasticity, right? How much are they willing to spend?
Yeah.
How's the demand curve going to change based on your pricing? Obviously, in an ideal world, you would have specific listings towards specific segments that'll kind of match that demand, which something we've been doing a lot is like diversifying our listings to try to hit these target experiences. Like, we have dedicated bachelorette experiences now on our party bikes, right? You can add more value because, like you said, that customer segment, the elasticity is lower, right? So they're willing to spend more. So add more value and raise the ticket price, right? And raise the perceived value. And whereas just a traveler in town that just wants to see the city, they're not willing to pay as much. So, but you can have a different listing for them. Yeah.
Great advice, Douglas. I'm glad we recorded that because I'm gonna dissect that.
I know, he just made us like a marketing segment in live time, and it got my wheels going. I'm like, shoot, I go to like these nice hotels and try to give them affiliate links. I need to be going to hostels and letting them sell my experience. Like, it's crazy, but that's a thing now that you wouldn't think would sell your tours, but it can.
Yeah, I'm thinking, does Hostel World have an ad platform? Do they have stuff in their confirmation emails? And it's not that big in the US.
You got to bring extra deodorant, for the people that are coming from them too, and beard trimmers and all sorts of other stuff you got to worry about.
Been in my fair share of hostels. That is the place to get an experience for sure.
And an STD. Just kidding.
You're speaking from experience, Kai? Or,
oh, God.
Oh, Hilo, Hawaii. Oh, boy. No, I'm just kidding. I did stay in a hostel there. Did not get an STD, but I had some very interesting mushroom tea. All right, timestamp that. What is that? All right.
And that is overtime.
Yeah, right. No,
I'll leave you guys with just one. Oh, are we done? You're wrapping up? Okay.
No.
Oh, so just one, kind of one interesting, thread on this too. The expectation would be that your upper income, your more affluent travelers are always going to be the ones that are going to go all out and buy the top tier ticket and so forth. But it's not the case at all. In fact, we did some purchase intent, analysis on different ticket types. This was for attractions, and the expectation was that, that the more affluent, the older traveler, they would want the most flexibility. They'd want whatever, the glass of champagne when they get to the top of the deck or whatever it is. But in fact, it's actually flipped. It's kind of younger, in some cases, lower income travelers who, if it was an experience that really mattered to them, it didn't matter. I mean, if they wanted it, they were willing to pay for it. And a lot of the affluent travelers, in fact, there's a little bit of that, that millionaire next door myth is, well, it's it's a reality. It's like, they're the ones who were, driving a Honda and, getting the cheap ticket, right? That they're, more price sensitive. So it's also like knowing who that customer is, knowing who your customers are. It's important not to think of it just in terms of demographics, like, okay, all young people are like this, or all older travelers are like this, or even by, if income, but it's really like intent. So it's understanding the psychological profile of your customer. So building almost like archetypes, if you can, like customer archetypes for your experiences, and then building out, products or messaging that targets those profiles. And a word that I really like to think about is aspiration. So what is the aspirational profile of that customer? Like, what are they looking for? Why are they doing this experience? And one good example, we have a report actually that we just released, which you guys actually would probably both be interested in because you're in the world of activities and adventure, the outdoor. So there's it outlines basically 3 core profiles for the activities traveler. So the traveler that does the kayaking tour, for example, or, does the hiking or the trekking. So, the most common is they're just seeking something new. Like they're seeking an experience, like they're looking to get pushed or do something new. And that represents about 2/3, or a little bit less. And then there's the enthusiast, the passionate traveler who is, they're really enthusiastic about, so like in my case, I cycle. So like something I do regularly. And if I'm looking for like a cycling experience or a tour, I want to know exactly like, all the details about the trip. Do I bring my own bike? Should I bring my own pedals? Like what's all of those details that are, really important. And then there's the other group, which is basically, along for the ride. So someone else in the travel party chose it, and they're just, they have no choice. So you have to kind of gauge their, how interested they are. But so to me, that's really important because you've got different customers that will want different things right out of that experience. And so you have to identify. So one, do you want to create products for the adventurer or the enthusiast versus the enthusiast? Or do you want to should you train your guides to make sure that they can really, they have the emotional IQ to kind of suss out kind of who's who right on the tour? Or can you do, some companies do this, like a pre-departure
Questionnaire
survey, right? So you kind of gauge, and you can have some psychographic, questions that you can use to, put people into buckets and then, identify and personalize their experience. And you want to know, oh, okay, this dad, really didn't want to, you can tell, like the dad really did not want to be here. So what can you kind of do to make sure that the dad has a good experience? Because even though he's being dragged along, you want him to feel comfortable and like, okay, that wasn't bad. I would take the kids back here, right? Like that's, so all of those things are, kind of really, important to, to nail it with the diversity of guests, right, that you've got on your experience.
Yeah, it's great insight, and it ties right back into that tour design thing. Like, I think that, it made me think of like, shoot, what are we doing for that person that doesn't necessarily want to be there, and yet they're there because the other 8 friends of theirs are there, you know, like, yeah, we definitely, it's a really good idea to think about that more and plan ahead for that. I was trying to figure out like, how do you even plan ahead for that? But I think the questionnaire is a really good way, or maybe there's even a couple little check boxes when they're booking their tour that can make it a little bit easier. But it's one of those things that you want to be forgettable, but you also don't want to forget about doing, you know?
Yeah. Just get people out there thinking. Some stuff we do. We like ask what type of music they want to hear. We kind of figure out if the bachelorette parties, like mom or mom's friends are coming. It's like, okay, we've got an older group on board as well. Stuff like that. So that's awesome angle to take, Douglas. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned that report. I actually shared that report. A couple things that I found interesting from it on a previous episode, because I thought it was the adventure traveler report or whatever that you guys had shared a couple weeks ago. I kind of compared it to like my numbers and what I was seeing, and it was like so close to what I'm seeing in my business. So I thought it was super helpful that like it made me think about things, and also like clarified some of the things we're doing are good, or maybe we're ahead of the average rate that people can expect, or I don't know, all those things. But I say that to acknowledge that Arrival is much more than just one conference in the year, right? Like you guys put out a lot of really good information. I highly recommend to my franchisees and to everyone else to become Arrival Pro members, because you get these little extra things along the way that can help you make these really good informed decisions. I think anyone listening to this will be like, wow, Douglas actually knows his shit, knows what he's talking about. Like you have clearly done the research and know this industry really well, and you get the benefit of that in being an Arrival Pro member. So there's a little hard sell for you on Arrival Pro in return for your time here on the podcast. Thank you.
Keep reading. We love it. So thank you.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, thanks, Douglas. Really enjoyed the conversation. I appreciate you joining us, sharing.
Well, yeah, thanks for having me.
I gotta work, grind. That's just the way it is. I gotta get up, scale, and grow my biz. I gotta